Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica DiRuzza from Trust Psyche, and this is my YouTube channel. Today, I feel inspired to come on here with all of you to talk about the sun through the houses. For those of you who follow my work closely, you're probably thinking, wow, I don't really ever hear Jess talk about the houses very much, or even maybe the signs. But I do use the houses and I do think of them in my work. It's just not always the most prominent thing that comes forward. Trust Psyche School of Astrology and Depth Psychology is actually going to be teaching a course called an Archetypal Approach to the Signs and the Houses. And Travis DeRutz and I are going to be co-teaching that in the near future. So I'm really excited to share some of my thoughts and ideas that have been coming through around the sun through the houses. And originally I was going to title this The Sun Through the Houses for Women, but I decided in thinking about it some more that yes, for women, but also for anybody who is very oriented towards other. So that could be therapists, that could be coaches, that could be caretakers of any kind. It's someone whose sense of self and life's journey has often been guided by, defined by, um, orientation towards other. And that could also include empaths, right? Those of us who are highly sensitive people or empaths or people who were conditioned as children to be tuned into other. We see that a lot in parentified children. And so this talk is to help illustrate what happens when we look at the sun placement in a birth chart when that person has been largely um, tuned into other versus self in their life. So I want to begin by talking about the meaning of the sun archetypally in astrology. The sun is the illumination of the self. It's the heroine or hero's journey that every human being goes on throughout the entire course or arc of their life. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And on that heroine's journey, or on that hero's journey, there's the awakening to self, that very mysterious aspect of being human, of being a soul incarnate in this realm on earth. So the sun is the individual, and it's the unique shining forth and brilliance of every single person. And when we look at the birth chart, when we look to the sun, we're looking to the solar self, the one who is one of a kind, who is here on a journey. And an aspect of that journey is the awakening and discovery of self in this particular incarnation. Personality wise, we know it has a lot to do with how the personality comes through and the expression of self and identity. It's what we identify with, but it's in a deeper sense that eternal light of the soul that never goes out. It's that light that never goes out. It's that consciousness and that conscious awareness that is present inside when we slow down and we get quiet and we tune in. It's that presence that we have. It's that witness that we have. But it's also how we bring that presence externally out into the world and shine it out to other. So when we're looking at the birth chart, the placement of the sun is very significant because it shows us what the content and the process is of someone's hero's or heroine's journey of awakening to their self as an individuation process, as Jung would describe it. So there's an aspect of that journey where we go from being unconscious in a primordial state of being merged with no identity or egoic awareness. And as we develop as a human and become more of a sense of self and having more of a sense of separation from mother and father and family, we step more and more into the sun in our birth chart. Our early years are very defined by the moon. And of course, that always stays with us. But as we grow and as we develop psychologically and spiritually, we see the illumination of the self and the power of the life force of the individual through the sun show up in the birth chart. That's why over the entire evolution of a human being's life, the quality of the sun in the birth chart changes depending on the age of that person, the transits that they've gone through to the sun, and also where they're at in their development in their individuation process. So, a person who is gone on a deep journey into self and who is showing up in a way that is authentic to who their unique soul expression is, we see the sun in the chart radiate or shine or be more illuminated, right? There's more life force. We can think of the sun as our life force. It's the fire, it's the chi. But when we think of the sun astronomically in the solar system and all the planets going around it, it's also the light that illuminates all else, right? So when we see our moon or when we see the other planets in our solar system in the night sky, that's because the sun's light is reflecting and shining out so brightly. And then we get to see the reflection of the sun's rays off of those other celestial bodies. So, though the sun is the source of power and the source of light and the source of life, it also is the source of illumination and it lights up the other things around it. So when we return back to the sun through the chart, what we begin to see is where the sun's house placement is. That particular house is going to be the predominant area of life or the realm of existence where that person is going to be illuminating and bringing their soul life force expression into that space. And I'm going to give examples in just a moment. But what I want us to have awareness around, and this goes for women, this goes for wives, this goes for daughters and sisters, this goes for mothers, um, this goes for empaths, this goes for caretakers. When our life has been one in which we use our self or life force energy to tune in and to support and to reflect other, what happens is that house placement of the sun can become less about how we're shining forth in the world and our own personal hero or heroine's journey. And it can become more about how we are supporting other to do that. And therefore, in a way, occupying the domain of our sun in that house. So let me give an example of a fifth house sun placement. If someone who's strongly oriented towards other has a fifth house sun placement, what we would expect from that person is to see that they're bringing their life force energy and their creativity and their unique personhood into supporting other in their creative path. So a fifth house sun placement in this regard that I've been describing, you would see that person's life's work, that person's life's path, their service, their calling to have been largely defined by supporting other in their unique creative expression, their unique playful inner child coming out. So they would maybe perhaps have a job or a career or spend most of their time doing acts of service where they're using their creative life force energy to help other people fulfill their creative self expression as an artist or as helping them get in touch with what their joyful, pleasurable expressions are, what their hobbies are, what they do for entertainment. What we would want to see in the development of that human is to learn to practice to bringing that energy back to self, back to one's own sun. And that doesn't mean we stop or cut off the illumination that the sun naturally brings to other. But what we realize is that by tending deeply to self, we come into the illumination of our own central solar system, our own star within. And that deep soul tending that we're doing there, we learn to give back to self what we have been conditioned to always give out to other. And this is where a really powerful thing happens around embodiment for that soul, where that soul begins to drink back its own medicine given by its higher self, given by the divine, and saying, if you focus your life force energy, if you focus your time, if you focus your thoughts, if you focus your actions on fulfilling your own creative purpose, by painting your paintings, by writing your writings, by dancing your dances as a fifth house sun, not only are you going to come home to yourself, not only are you going to fulfill your soul's calling, not only are you going to experience more joy, but you're also going to naturally, effortlessly illuminate, energize your own life and of all the beings around you that you encounter. Because the sun, in the fullness of its divine light, naturally illuminates the space around, right? Just as our sun in the sky naturally illuminates the day and the moon and the other planets, when we stand fully in our solar life force self, we naturally illuminate the space around us without effort, without trying. And we still get to be of service, and we still get to be a guiding light for that fifth house, and that other people will naturally be drawn to us, because when we stand in our own solar self, we provide an attraction. There's an attraction or a magnetism where other wants to come close and sit next to our fire and to hear the stories we have to tell, because we're standing in our light, because we're standing in our fire. So we would see the maturation of the heroine or hero's journey in the fifth house sun placement of someone who has been conditioned to serve other as fulfilling their own creative life purpose and the embodiment of that day to day, which is often going to feel both counterintuitive, perhaps even taboo, forbidden, not allowed, or it can feel like we're going against everything we were conditioned and taught to believe to be true. That living a good life is one that is selfless and oriented towards serving other. But what we actually know to be true is that when we can stand deeply in our own self and tending to ourself lovingly with care, we naturally serve other without trying. So, one thing that we can see as we move now into the ninth house example of a sun placement is when someone has yet to come home to themselves and give that same life force energy to self that they have been doing up until their whole life or most of their life till now, is we can see someone who might have a very strong priority or even obsession with making sure that other people in their life get educated and get highly educated. Maybe they've created opportunities for their children or other people that they've come into contact with to really get education. And education becomes such a main focus and priority for them that they must have the others in their life get that education, get that philosophical training, get that cultural experience through travel, through reading, and through studying religion or spirituality. And so, in a way, there's this kind of projection or siphoning off of turning one's light and illumination out, focusing it like a lighthouse outward, and saying, I'm going to give all of my life force solar energy for you to make sure that you get education at the potential expense, sacrifice, or even harm to self, where we would then want to see how has that ninth house sun person pursued their own spiritual truth and worldview? How have they dedicated their time and energy to their own higher learning and education through philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics? How have they spent their time and their money going and doing their own travels instead of planning other people's trips for them? Are you giving to self to the same degree or hopefully more than what you're giving to other in that sun house placement for you in your chart? We need to equally give to self or hopefully more than what we give to other. When we do that, we naturally inspire those in our lives, like a rippling effect of Psyche, to either follow in our footsteps or to awaken in their own process to their own truth around how they want to pursue their own education. By us going and finishing school or finishing that degree or finishing that certificate, we naturally inspire other to go and follow their own truth on their path around that way. So by being in ourself, we naturally illuminate the way for other instead of trying to force other or guide other or control other or maybe even manipulate other to go and find their truth, right? And getting into those power struggles, getting into those places of feeling despair or loss of connection with self because we've been giving it to other, we've been siphoning it off. What I know is that when we stand in our own truth and do what is best for our highest good, that is what is best for others' highest good around us. So think of the sun in your house as the illumination of that aspect of life of being human. And that when you embody that, when you step into that with strength and courage, you naturally become a guiding light for others to do that as well. So, another example here would be 11th house sun placement, a tendency we can see there with women or with empaths or people who have been tuned into other is they'll spend a lot of their energy trying to build other people up as leaders, to lead groups, to be progressive, to stand in their new paradigm truth. And that can come at the expense of that person doing that for their own self. Are they becoming a leader? Are they running groups? Are they standing in the front of the room and helping put forward their brilliance and their ideas, right? Their own idealism and their own hope, instead of using all of their energy to try to get others to be leaders or get in touch with their idealism and their hope. The way that we know that this has become out of balance, and I see this a lot with people that I work with, and I hear this quite a bit from women, especially older women, is they'll say things to me like, I would rather get sick than continue on in the way my life is right now. I would rather die. I think I would be happier dead than continuing on in this way. And by this, what they mean is that all of their life has been defined by serving or tending to husband, children, coworkers, clients. And there's a profound emptiness and a profound sadness and a profound disconnection from joy and pleasure and the beautiful feminine aspects of life, of embodiment and erotic sexuality, feeling desired and desiring. And I feel so deeply saddened um, when I witness this level of despair to say, I'm so busy taking care of everybody else that nobody takes care of me. I'm so busy taking care of everyone else that no one asks me how I'm doing. Um, I had a woman client recently had got really sick and ended up in the hospital and said she felt better sick in that hospital bed than at home because at least somebody came in and asked her if she needed anything. At least somebody came in and fluffed her pillow. And to me, not only is that a really sad condition of a lot of women's lives, um, but I think that when we bring that into this astrological awareness and we look at the house placement of the sun, one guiding principle we could have here in our questioning, our curiosity is there a way for you to start to learn to say no, to have a boundary there, and start to give what you would naturally almost uh, kind of compulsory give out, and to say, what would happen if I stopped doing that? Just choose one small thing and I gave that to me. I wonder what could happen from there. And so I think this can happen on a spectrum, but what I've noticed is that as we age, and we start to realize how much time we have left and how precious the time we have here is, we start to really question, I think, especially as women, what's my purpose? What's my path? And the sun is about your purpose, it's about what your sole purpose is here. And when you look at the house that it's in, it gives you a really strong message that that's the place that if you choose to focus your life force energy into, you will begin to experience a level of communion with self, which is the divine, the sacred self, which is source, in a way that will uplift and inspire and guide you in a deeply fulfilling spiritual, psychological, and emotional way. And so we look at it as the filling up of self through our own inner light by tending to what our deep truth is, listening to it moment to moment, and making those choices and taking those actions to practice. And it's a practice of embodying those things. If you have a 10th house sun, are you really busy helping everyone figure out what their career is and supporting them, cheerleading them on, counseling them, holding space for them? Are you fulfilled in your career? Are you fulfilled in your career? Because if you're not, then that could be a really good indication that you're giving out of your sacred self to other, what you could be giving to yourself, and feeling that fulfillment. And then from that place, from that fullness, our cup overfloweth and we can be of service all day long. If you have a 4th house sun, do you feel a profound sense of belonging? Do you feel a strong connection to home, to your roots, to the land that you live on, to the spirit of the land that you're in? Do you feel that? Are you fulfilled there? Are you living that dream for yourself? If you are, beautiful. If you're not, my question would be, is there a way in which perhaps you're giving that away and therefore not able to give that to self? What I know is that we cannot truly be in a state of health if we don't have for ourselves what we are sometimes desperately trying to give to other, because we were taught or we were conditioned or we were modeled that that's what it meant to be a good human. If you want to talk about a feminist revisioning of life, of psyche, and of astrology, we need to see what would it be like to put that feminine principle in the center of our experience and then have life emanate out from that place. The feminine core is one of being in a place of love, of pleasure, of eros, of joy, honoring our pain, honoring our suffering, and knowing deeply and intimately what our desires are. What does life look like if we can actually both know that and then tend to it by embodying it? So I am looking over here. There's been a lot of comments. I'm sorry, I can't read them all Uh, there's been a lot that's been said. I want to thank you for being here with me, and just want to see if there's anything else that I want to have come through. Mm, okay. When you look at your birth chart and you see what house your sun is in, whatever house that is, when you whatever you know about that house, and if you need to know more, right, you can just watch a video or Google it, whatever, read about it. Sit in contemplation and genuinely ask yourself, do I feel fulfilled in this place in my life? Does this realm or domain of life feel exciting to me? Do I wake up in the morning energized and um, joyful to go and experience that aspect of life? Okay, so let me start with myself. I'm an 11th house sun person. So a lot of myself can be greatly guided by how I show up in community, how I show up as a teacher, how I show up as a leader, how I show up with my friends, right? How I show up in this place of presenting a vision, right? The 11th house is very visionary, it's very future oriented, ruled by Aquarius, Uranus, and it's very much about idealism and hope, right? And I very much can embody that, right? And I can embody that as a person, as a friend, as a teacher, and I do. But am I being fulfilled by those relationships? Am I being fulfilled in my friendships? Do I feel reciprocated, that I am getting back from my friends the same level of care and magic and excitement and presence that I give? Because if I'm getting my self-worth from how good I'm making everybody else feel around me, full of hope and vision and magic, then I'm going to feel desperately alone on the inside and really, really sad and full of grief. And so, how do I learn to give myself those things? And how do I learn to say, you know what? There are certain roles that bring me genuine joy. I love being a teacher. I love being a leader of different groups. But when I was younger, especially in my 20s, so much of my time and worth came from how people liked me as being their teacher or their leader. I used to run half a dozen different groups at the same time: astrological groups, women's groups, teaching multiple courses, doing therapy groups. And I still do those things. But I do them because it's coming from a genuine desire inside to share and connect from that place that is not coming at the expense of my own well being. And back in the day when it was much more unconscious and compulsory, it did not feel like I was living in health and balance. It felt more like it was coming from a compulsive place of trying to fulfill self worth. And the sun has a lot to do with what our self worth is. It is the self. How do we value the self? So, in that regard, I stopped doing all the groups. And for several years, I said, I'm not going to run any groups and I'm not going to teach so that I can get clear on what I need to feel like I'm taking care of me. And now, as I've stepped back into that, it's coming from a different place. And so the journey of the self, of the sun in the house, is definitely one of that evolution of the hero or heroine's journey. There's a death rebirth process. So you start off in a place, you die and you let go of that thing, and then you come back to it into a phase of renewal that comes from a greater place of self understanding, right? The hero leaves the community, goes off on the journey, and then returns back, but with a sense of embodied wisdom that they got from that journey. So, though we return to the place that we began in our house placement, the subjective and inner state of, that we bring to that has changed and has matured. And so it's not to say then that 11th house sun placement isn't a leader or doesn't teach or isn't, very much oriented towards group and friends and community. Clearly, I'm here doing this with all of you. It just means that I'm doing it from a different state of awareness than I used to do it before. And so the sun represents the journey of coming to consciousness, right? It's the conscious part of the chart. It's the waking up and that gaining of conscious awareness. And in this regard, to self. And the beauty of that journey is that it often requires coming into contact with other to get the reflection of self back. And this is where Winnicott says, I am seen, therefore I exist. And where the sun is in your chart is the place in your life, the area of life where you must be seen. But in order to be seen, we must show up and we must take the risk of sharing ourselves. Like I take the risk of sharing myself every time I come on here with you. And then I get seen by you. And that fulfills a solar part in me because we all need attention. It is human to need attention. It is human to need to be seen psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. It's what we're here to do. So, how do we do that in a way that fulfills that house placement in a way that is the most loving to self that we can be? I see a couple questions here. It's hard. It's hard for me. There's a lot of dialogue, so it's hard for me to see all of it. Happy birthday. Okay. We're asking about. You want to hear about the houses I haven't talked about? Yes, of course. Okay. You want to talk about the eighth house sun? Okay, I'll do that, and then I'm gonna have to stop. Um, so just take a moment here. Mm, An eighth house sun placement has a lot to do with finding the safety in one's life to be able to intimately explore your own sexuality, your own sexual orientation, your own sexual desires, your sexual history, whether there's been trauma there or not. It also has to do with the deep, deep, deep initiation into your own power. What is power for you? How are you in your power or how are you not in your power in your life? It also has a lot to do with that initiatory process into your own unconscious and doing really deep and profound explorations of your unconscious through things like that psychotherapy, different works of going deep within self to discover what is hidden within you. It's about you learning to shine a light into your own darkness, including areas where you potentially have shame, or places in your life where you feel repressed or stuck. It's about learning how to bring loving attention, and getting the support to do that for yourself, but also learning how and when you want to share the darkness with others. And by darkness, I don't necessarily mean things that are bad, or ugly, but just things that tend to be hidden. That can be secrets, yes, that can be things of guilt and shame, but it also can just be your deep, deep inner daemon. It can be your soul's truth, your soul's power, and learning how to um, share that and to express that with others in a way that feels safe for you, where you don't feel like you're being judged or shamed. It's really important for eighth house sun people to um, get to have the experience of being in a really non-judgmental environment and being with non-judgmental people where you get to share the fullness of your truth and your intensity. Um, And there can be a tendency for eighth house sun people to feel potentially really called to or comfortable in going into other people's shadowy material, or illuminating other people's unconscious or other people's shame or other people's secrets. And though that is a gift and a superpower you have, it's about making sure that you're doing that in a way that feels right to you, that feels good to you and safe to you and to the other person. That's why an eighth house sun could be really amazing at doing any kind of psychology work, counseling work, um, showing up in that realm of depth psychology with others. But it's first, how do you do that with yourself? How do you give that to yourself? And how do you get to share that with other people instead of feeling like you're the force that has to wake up the family or wake up the toxicity, or bring that to light? There's a way that you can do that without forcing it. There's a way that you can do it by deeply embodying your own path of transformation that will then naturally um, allow the others in your life to wake up to their own truths there. All right, everyone. I've got to stop right now. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I look forward to being with you next time. Follow me. I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. If you liked what happened here, like this video, leave a comment, share with your friends. Help me grow and get out there. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And I will see you all next time. All right. Ciao, everyone.